who should actually reach for this Ibanez Axion label RGD71ALMS 7-string, who would be better off sticking with a 6-string, and does the price make sense for the everyday player? If you're on the fence about adding a low B string to your arsenal, the decision hinges on what you plan to do with it, how much extra neck stretch you can tolerate, and whether the tonal options justify the cost. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first heard about the Axion label series, the headline was 7-string for the modern shredder. That sounded great, but the reality of a 7-string can be a bit of a minefield. You've got a wider neck, a different feel under your picking hand, and you need a setup that really balances the low B with the higher strings. The biggest hesitation I've seen from buyers is whether the extra string will actually improve their music or just add an awkward stretch to their playing. It's a classic case of more is better versus more is just more work. Let's break down the practical side of the Axion label RGD71ALMS. First off, the body is made from Nyatoh, a tone wood that sits somewhere between mahogany and maple in terms of warmth and brightness. In a real-world rehearsal room, that translates to a solid mid-range punch that doesn't get lost when you're cranking up a distortion pedal. If you're a metal or progressive player who already uses a 7-string, you'll notice that the low end stays tight, no flabby, uncontrolled rumble thanks to the dense Nyatoh core. That's a big plus for anyone who wants to lock in heavy riffing without sacrificing note definition. The neck is a Panga/Walnut construction, and that's where the hidden trade-off lives. Panga, also known as sapele, is stable, but it's not as hard as maple or mahogany. For most players, the stability holds up fine, but if you're a gigging musician who swaps strings on the road, you might find the neck needing a quick shim after a few weeks of heavy use. It's not a catastrophic issue, but it's something to keep in mind if you're used to a rock-solid maple neck that barely reacts to temperature changes. Now, the most obvious change when you move to a 7-string is the fretboard. The Axion uses Macassar Ebony, which feels smooth and gives a nice articulate response when you're hammering or pull-off across the upper registers. In practice, that means your solo lines on the high strings stay clean even after you've been digging into the low B for a minute. The Ebony also contributes to a slightly brighter attack, which can be beneficial if you like your riffs cutting through a mix. However, Ebony can be a bit unforgiving on the fingertips if you're not accustomed to it. Some players report a little extra soreness during the first few hours of playing. If you're already using an ebony or rosewood board, you'll likely adapt quickly. If not, be ready for a short adjustment period. The pickup's two active humbuckers in black Aurora burst mat are the workhorse of this instrument. They're designed to handle high gain without going into noise, which is exactly what a player looking to drop down to B or even lower needs. In my tests, the low B stayed clear even when the amp was turned up to 11, and the upper strings retained enough clarity to play intricate leads. One scenario I've seen is a guitarist layering rhythm and lead parts live. They'll use the neck pickup for chugging, then swing to the bridge for a searing solo. The active circuitry stays consistent across that switch, so you won't hear a sudden drop in output that forces you to adjust your amp settings mid-song. Where the Axion really shines is in that dual-role flexibility. Imagine a band that plays both modern metal and clean, melodic passages in the same set. With the 7-string, you can keep the low B anchored for the heavy sections and then pull back to a clean tone without losing the ability to play higher register chord voicings. That's a practical strength that many 6-string players miss because they have to detune an entire instrument or switch guitars mid-show. On the flip side, the extra string adds a physical stretch for anyone with smaller hands. The neck width at the nut is noticeably broader, and the distance between frets on the low side can feel cramped if you're used to standard 6-string spacing. A practical weakness shows up when you try to execute fast, palm-muted rhythms. The low string can interfere with the muting hand, leading to a slightly muddier sound if you're not careful with your technique. If you're a beginner or someone who typically plays upright bass-style riffs, you might spend more time adjusting your hand position than actually playing your parts. Another practical concern is the price tag. At the price point for an Ibanez Premium series, you're paying for brand reputation, high-quality hardware, and the 7-string capability. For someone who already owns a solid 6-string and only occasionally dabbles in low B riffs, the investment